The ocean was silent that morning. No waves, no wind, just the sound of a man's breath, heavy, broken, as he sat on the edge of his empty boat, staring at hands that had once pulled life from the sea. His nets were gone. His home was gone. His name swallowed by debt and shame. And in that silence, he asked the question that breaks us all. What is left when you lose everything? If this story moves you, let it stay with you, and if you believe in the power of stories that heal, join us on this journey. Matteo had been a fisherman for 30 years. His father was a fisherman, his grandfather before him. The sea was not just his work, it was his identity, his pride, the only language he ever truly spoke. But the storm that came 3 months ago didn't just take his boat, it took everything. His nets torn beyond repair, his savings swallowed by debts he couldn't pay, his reputation drowned in the whispers of a village that no longer saw him as a man, but as a warning. He sat now on the remains of what used to be his life, a broken hull, half buried in sand, too damaged to float, too heavy to move. The other fishermen passed him every morning, their boats cutting through the water like promises he could no longer keep. They didn't greet him anymore, not out of cruelty, but out of mercy. What do you say to a man who has become invisible? His wife had stopped asking when he'd go back out. His children had stopped waiting by the door, and Matteo had stopped looking at his own reflection. Because the man staring back was a stranger, hollow-eyed, bent, defeated. He told himself it was the storm's fault. He told himself it was bad luck, bad timing, bad fate. But deep down, in the place where truth lives, he knew the real storm wasn't outside, it was inside. It was the voice that whispered every morning, "You're finished, you're done, you'll never rise again." And he believed it. The days blurred together. He stopped going to the docks. He stopped repairing what little he had left. He spent his hours sitting on that broken boat, staring at the horizon, waiting for nothing. The sea, once his companion, now felt like a mirror reflecting back everything he had lost, everything he would never be again. Then one evening, as the sun bled into the water, an old man appeared. He didn't ask permission. He didn't introduce himself. He simply sat down beside Matteo on the sand, close enough to be present, far enough to be respectful. His clothes were worn but clean. His face, weathered by years, carried the kind of calm that only comes from surviving your own storms. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then the old man asked, quietly, "What are you fishing for now?" Matteo didn't look at him. "I'm not fishing. I have no boat, no nets, no reason." The old man nodded slowly, as if he'd expected that answer. "So you're fishing for reasons?" Matteo frowned. "What? You're sitting here every day, casting your mind into the past, trying to pull up reasons why you can't move forward. That's still fishing. You're just using the wrong bait." The words landed like stones in still water. Matteo felt something stir inside him. Anger, maybe, or recognition. "You don't understand," Matteo said, his voice rough. "I lost everything. The storm took it all." The old man turned to him then, his eyes gentle but unwavering. "The storm took your boat. You gave away the rest." Matteo's jaw tightened. "I didn't give anything away. You gave away your belief. You gave away your name. You gave away tomorrow because you're too busy drowning in yesterday. The old man paused, letting the silence settle. The sea didn't take your future, Mateo. Your thoughts. Did Mateo wanted to argue? He wanted to walk away. But something in those words held him in place, like an anchor he didn't know he needed. The old man stood, brushing sand from his hands. You think your life is over because your boat is gone. But a fisherman isn't his boat. A fisherman is the man who knows how to read the water, how to wait, how to pull life from the deep when everyone else sees nothing. That man is still here. The question is, do you still see him? And then he walked away, his footsteps fading into the sound of the tide. Mateo sat alone as the sun disappeared. The old man's words circled in his mind like gulls over the shore. Your thoughts did this, not the storm. Your thoughts. He looked down at his hands, scarred, strong, still capable. He thought about the mornings he used to wake before dawn, the way the cold air felt on his face, the rhythm of casting nets, the weight of the catch. He thought about his children who used to run to him when he returned, their faces lit with pride. He thought about his wife who used to believe in him, not because of what he had, but because of who he was. And slowly, painfully, something shifted. What if the old man was right? What if the storm didn't end his story? It just tore away the chapter he'd been clinging to. What if losing everything wasn't the end, but the beginning of something he couldn't see yet? The next morning, Mateo woke before the sun. He didn't have a boat, but he had hands. He didn't have nets, but he knew men who did. He walked to the docks, not as a ghost, but as a man with a question. He asked to borrow a small net. He offered to clean boats in exchange. He listened more than he spoke. And when the other fishermen saw him standing there, not begging, not broken, but present, something changed in their eyes too. He started small. One net, one morning, one catch. It wasn't much, but it was movement. It was breath. It was proof that he wasn't finished. He taught young boys how to tie knots on the shore. He helped repair boats he didn't own. He shared what little he caught with families who had less. And slowly, the village began to see him again, not as the man who lost everything, but as the man who refused to stay lost. Months passed. The sun rose and set. The tides turned, and Mateo kept moving. One morning, he stood on the deck of a small boat, not the one he lost, but one he'd built with borrowed wood, repaired nets, and hands that remembered how to create. It wasn't grand, it wasn't perfect, but it was his. He cast his net into the water, and as it sank beneath the surface, he realized something. The sea hadn't changed. The storms would come again. The tides would turn. But he was no longer the same man who sat on that broken hull, waiting for permission to live. He had changed his thoughts. And in changing his thoughts, he had changed his destiny. The net pulled heavy. He smiled not because of the catch, but because he finally understood. You are not what you lose. You are what you choose to build after. The ocean remembers nothing. It doesn't mourn the boats it takes. It doesn't celebrate the ones that return. It simply moves, eternal, indifferent, alive. And perhaps that's the lesson. Your story isn't written by what you've lost. It's written by what you do next.